Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Baumgarten, but I expect you already know that, and I welcome you to this discussion on Facebook, paltalk.com, and on YouTube, where our guest today is Salhi Hudayar. He is the Prime Minister in exile of East Turkestan. He is a Uyghur leader in the United States. And I invited Salhi on to talk about the latest developments with regard to ethnic and religious minorities in China. Now we are learning, and we didn't think it could get any worse than it already was, that they are killing people and harvesting their organs. This is the kind of conspiracy kind of theory that you hear. You know, somebody goes out on a date, brings a lady back to the hotel room, wakes up in a tub of water and ice with his kidney removed. Those are all nonsense stories. But this is the real deal, that the Chinese government is actually doing this to ethnic and religious minorities. Well, unfortunately, you see me, you don't see our good friend Salhi Hudayar. Why he's not here, I don't know. Maybe he has technical problems. Maybe something came up and he's not here. So I don't have him to question about it. And he's very well aware of what's happening there in China. And we know that there are a lot of other things going on right now. The Trump administration is all over China right now for the various human rights violations that are going on in Hong Kong and in the China mainland. And if Salhi Hudayar joins us while we are still on the air, so to speak. He's standing by, Maria Sliwa says. I don't see him standing by. I am in the studio, but I do not see Salhi. He has not entered the studio. Maria, could you ask him to try to close it and reopen it and see if that works? And can I resend the link? Yes, I can resend the link. Hold on. Guest. Copy the link. Gmail. Maria. Reply. And link. Send. So we will tread water a little bit here. We will tread water. It's in your email, Maria. We will tread water here a few minutes while we wait for Salhi Hudayar to join us. Let me talk about something else. I just started a new podcast, which you can find on Spotify and I think on other major podcast platforms, called The Gary Baumgarten Report. And in it, it's only 2.5 minutes long. And I'm going to kind of recapitulate what I said there, because this really has me very much concerned. We all know about the discourse on social media being less than polite. And you've heard me say, and you've seen me write many times, my displeasure with the impolite way many people respond to those with whom they disagree. Well, this carried out onto real life over the weekend. A friend of mine called me. She lives on Long Island. She was out at a restaurant with 2 other people. It was outdoor dining. They were waiting for their food to be delivered. And she was wearing her mask. And a handful of fellas who were, expressing their machismo, I guess, weren't wearing masks. And in my mind, that's bad enough. But what's worse is they approached my friend and her friends and they berated them for not wearing masks. I mean, for wearing masks. Now, we've heard cases where people have walked into stores, they refuse to wear a mask, either a customer or a store employee, a security guard confronts them, and then you have fisticuffs. But this was the first time I have heard of somebody actually bullying somebody, berating somebody in public because they chose to wear a facial covering. And if you believe what the doctors and the scientists tell us, when you wear that mask, yeah, you're protecting yourself, but more importantly, you're protecting the other person. She wasn't wearing a mask out of courtesy to herself. She was wearing a mask out of courtesy to them. Thank you, Maria. Because when she talks, if she should cough, if she should sneeze, it gets contained. That's why you wear the mask. She was very upset. By the way, this is a lady with a compromised immune system. She suffers from asthma. If you have asthma and you get the COVID and the respiratory side effects, it could kill you. She is high risk. She feels, well, occasionally she'll leave her house, but she will do it in a prudent manner. She won't go anywhere where there are large crowds. She won't go to an indoor setting. She always wears a face covering, and she expects people around her to wear face coverings as well. And people say, well, you know, it's my individual right. I'm an American. I don't have to wear. That's a separate issue, actually, but it's related to this one. If you want to wear a face covering, that's your business, but I don't have to wear mine. We've all heard that argument. I don't particularly subscribe to it, but I have friends who do. But this goes beyond that. This goes getting into the face of somebody who is wearing a face covering and making fun of her. Now, whether there was a loss of inhibition due to alcohol content, I don't know. But for whatever reason, the way these guys acted was beyond reprehensible, in my opinion. He is clicking on the link now. We're getting a play-by-play. This is like watching the hatch being removed from the Dragon space capsule yesterday, which splashed down in the Gulf of Mexico. A play-by-play. Watching that. Look who just appeared like magic in the Be Live waiting room so we could stream him to Facebook and to Pal Talk. Salhi Hudayar, the Prime Minister in exile of East Turkestan. I welcome you again to our discussion on Facebook Live, paltalk.com, and on YouTube.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and I'm sorry that we had a little mix-up there. You didn't have the link, but you're here now, and that's all that matters. I did the introduction a few moments ago, explaining, and I didn't think after our first two sessions we'd have something worse to report with regard to human rights violations in China. But now we can authoritatively say, Mr. Prime Minister, that they are taking Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minorities. They are killing them and they are harvesting their organs. I've never, as I said prior to your joining us, we've heard these conspiracy stories about a guy who wakes up in a hotel room after going out on a date with a woman that he met in the bar and getting drunk and maybe being drugged and waking up in his bathtub at the hotel with an incision and surrounded by ice water. And that's all nonsense. But this is the real deal. This is very serious stuff.
Absolutely. This is actually has been ongoing for decades. Previously, the Chinese government would harvest the organs of Uyghur political prisoners and Falun Gong political activists as well. However, over the past several years, especially with the building of these concentration camps And as China became a go-to location for accessible, organs, the Chinese government has been forcibly, taking the organs of Uyghurs that are in these concentration camps, conveniently, secretly relocating them to places like Heilongjiang, prisons in Heilongjiang province, which is near the Korean border. And surprisingly, well, not so surprisingly, Korea has become a big market for organs. And another thing, which is very even more disturbing, is the fact that the organs of Uyghurs are being sold to wealthy Muslims from the Middle East and other places as halal organs, meaning that these organs, these people who had these organs, they never consumed pork or alcohol, and stuff like that. And there's credible, information reports of special hospitals in China that have both the Chinese language and the Arabic language signage inside the hospital. They even have, in one hospital, they even have a halal restaurant and a place to pray. Ironically, because in East Turkestan, religion has been completely banned, yet they're, luring these wealthy Arabs and other Muslims, saying, we have halal organs for you if you would like.
Wow, that's really something. And anybody who knows me knows that I bristle at how, in such a cavalier manner, a lot of people make comparisons to the Nazis when there are relatively minor human rights violations that are going on. I just get right in their face and say you're besmirching the memory of the people who were killed in the Holocaust. If you want to compare what you're complaining about to taking people on cattle cars, taking them to concentration camps. But we do know that in those concentration camps, the Jews and others, because they weren't all Jews, but the Jews and others who were taken into those concentration camps, they did medical experimentation on them. And in my mind, as you describe, Mr. Prime Minister, what's going on in China to the Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minorities, I think that's a fair comparison to what the Nazis did to the Jews.
Absolutely. I mean, just to quickly address, we don't consider ourselves minorities because we are still the majority in East Turkestan, but absolutely. Inside these concentration camps, even inside and outside, people are forcibly medicated. These past 2 weeks, the Chinese government has been giving unknown, liquids to people, saying that they have to consume it. Um, Between 2016 and 2017, and this is according to the Chinese government state media Xinhua, they stated that they collected the DNA samples, voice prints, and retina scans of 36 million people in East Turkestan alone.
Holy camole. That's just amazing. And of course, if East Turkestan was a free sovereign nation, as you and I both hope it would be, then of course you wouldn't be in the minority, you'd be in the majority. There's no question about that. And I thank you for making that distinction. As I look at history and you look at how long the world remained silent and did nothing with fascism going across Europe, and how, I'll use one other example. There are way too many of them, but you look at Rwanda and the bodies flowing down the river, the genocide that went on there, and you look back and you say, how could we have just allowed this as human beings without some kind of intervention? And yet, right now, today, it's happening in a contemporary fashion. And as you point out, we're learning about it more so now, but this has been going on for decades. Now, we know China is a closed society. We know China has a huge army. We know that there's no appetite right now. I think it would probably be suicidal, both economically and militarily, to invade China to try to stop this. The president, I think he tries to be a non-interventionist anyway. I don't think he's a neocon, but he is taking actions that we have not seen previous administrations take with regard to sanctions and other steps that he has taken. That you were at the White House, I believe, so I presume you're a supporter of what the president is doing in this regard.
Absolutely. I mean, just last Friday, the Trump administration sanctioned the Chinese paramilitary force, the known as the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, which is a 3.5 million strong paramilitary force that's tasked with maintaining, quote, stability and developing the region, which is essentially colonizing East Turkestan. And so this was a very powerful sanction that the U.S. government did, because they are the Bingtuan, or the CPCC, is the most active and most direct, player in terms of engaging in the atrocities that China has been doing in East Turkestan. In fact, they're the ones that run these labor camps where people are being, used as slave labor to produce products ultimately for global consumption across the world.
So we've seen how these kinds of sanctions, there are mixed results. I don't know whether I personally support the continued sanctioning of Cuba, for example. That would be a very interesting discussion to have. And perhaps I should bring some people on both sides of that issue and discuss that. But we do see that it is very successful with regard to Iran. Iran is on the ropes right now. That government in Iran is on the ropes because of the sanctions, the squeeze that's been put on that country. And they're really on the verge of collapsing. Whether they will or not, I don't know. But we know that as bad as the pandemic has affected us economically here in the United States, globally it has an impact. And specifically in China, where this all began, it's having a terrific impact. Now, I'm setting this up, a long setup for a short question, and that is, the polling suggests that at this point in time, Joe Biden is the leading candidate. I'm not asking you to become partisan by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm wondering whether you have made inroads, or you hope to make inroads, should in November Biden be elected president, to ensure that these sanctions continue, because I'm not so sure they will with regard to Iran, but whether they will continue with regard to China if it's a Democratic White House come January 21st.
Well, just to answer this, we should just look back at the past 8 years, the 8-year term of the Obama administration, during which Biden was the vice president. These atrocities were happening in East Turkestan even during those times. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, it's been ongoing for decades. However, the Obama administration did nothing. They didn't do anything to even condemn it. In fact, one of my conversations last year at an event, I happened to meet with Susan Rice, who was the former national security advisor under the Obama administration. And I asked her, these atrocities are going on in East Turkestan. 3 million people are locked up in concentration camps. What can and should the U.S. government do? And she simply said nothing. We're not going to. There's nothing that we can do. It's not like we can go, wage a war against China. We need China to, improve the global economy, this and that. So, just based on these few instances, and the fact that Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has invested in a Chinese company, a tech company that is complicit in the genocide that's occurring in East Turkestan and the total surveillance state, shows that, and no apology has been given yet. We're still waiting on that. Shows that it's very difficult to see what will happen. I don't think that anything will improve. I don't think they'll follow through their campaign promises that they're making at the moment.
And I'll point out that Susan Rice has been named as a potential running mate for Joe Biden. And so now we know where she stands on this, should she become the vice presidential candidate. And many people believe that in a Biden administration, the vice president will probably have more actual, it won't be just a titular position, probably have some policy-making influence more so than in previous administrations. So that's a very interesting thing to point out. So what can we do, those of us who are not in government, to help the people in East Turkestan?
So as far as what the American people can do, I mean, we can definitely, every American can speak to their member of Congress, write to their member of Congress, call them, call their senators, their congressmen, urge them to recognize the atrocities as a genocide, urge them to pass the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, and of course, show solidarity to our cause, spread awareness about the situation, and hope that the U.S. administration urge their members of Congress to urge the U.S. administration to take concrete actions, other than just sanctions, by raising this issue at the UN Security Council, upholding the UN Genocide Prevention Act, upholding the Elie Wiesel Genocide Prevention Act, Genocide Act, which was signed back in 2018 by President Trump.
Well, this is clearly, and I, hold up the mantle of this often, not a partisan issue in my view. It's a human rights issue. Human rights issues transcend partisanship. And there's just one little sidebar that I want to discuss because people may be a little confused. You're the man. You say Uyghur, right? Do I pronounce it properly the way you say it?
Uyghur.
Okay, well, I'm trying. We pronounce it in the news media a little bit differently. I don't know how that happens, but there is a consensus in the news media like Beijing was Peking for decades. I believe that we in the media ought to be pronouncing names, proper names, the way that the people pronounce it themselves. So I stand to be corrected when I say Uyghur. I don't know that I could change that where I work, but I just want people to know that we're talking about the same people, even though we may pronounce it differently.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's much difficult for Americans, Europeans to pronounce Uyghur. I think the closest you can get it is Uyghur, which is still a bit off. But what we ask, the media as well, is not just the media, but the U.S. government, media organizations, and individuals, is to use the correct terminology when referring to our homeland. So our homeland is known as East Turkestan. It's been known as East Turkestan for over 1,000 years. However, the Chinese, when they invaded East Turkestan, they renamed it to Xinjiang, which means the new territory, and it's a colonial term that is very insulting to us, and we despise that term. Similarly, they invaded Tibet, and they renamed Tibet to Xizang, but in the broad international community, nobody but China refers to Tibet as Xizang.
Yeah, at Fox for a long time, we were the only country the only news organization, to my knowledge, to hold out. There are probably others, but the only one that I'm aware of to hold out and not call Myanmar, but call it Burma. I think there's a parallel there. I think that that's gone by the wayside because so many people say Myanmar that it has become a common usage. And we don't want the people of East Turkestan to be forgotten as the people of East Turkestan. So that's a very important point to make as well. Salhi Hudayar, please, I want you back on. I said this the last time, to talk about something positive in the future. Let's hope that we find something good to talk about, to ease the human rights violations in China. That if we keep this story alive, not just here, obviously, but elsewhere, that it will be an educational process for the people, and they can put pressure on their elected officials, Democrat or Republican, to keep the pressure on the Chinese. And
absolutely, I think there are a lot of positive steps that have been made. I think that this issue is going to be an international issue. It's starting to be. You had UK, France, Canada stepping up as well. I think in the near future, and hopefully within the next decade, I think I'm pretty hopeful that East Turkestan will be an independent country once more.
Me too. And when I say the Chinese, I mean the Chinese government. I just want to make that clarification as well. So Salhi Hudayar, we'll have you on again. Absolutely. And thanks for joining us, everybody, especially if you're in the path of the hurricane. Stay safe. And as I like to say at the end of our discussions, peace out.